Lost civilizations. What ancient engineers knew before the Great Reset settle into comfort tonight, and let your mind drift to a time when the world held secrets we're only beginning to understand. Across the American landscape, from the mist-covered mounds of Ohio to the sun-baked canyons of the Southwest, lie engineering marvels that shouldn't exist. Massive earthworks aligned with mathematical precision to track celestial cycles. Stone blocks fitted so perfectly that not even a blade can slip between them. Canal systems so sophisticated that modern cities still follow their ancient paths. For too long, we've been told these were the work of simple farmers and hunter-gatherers using primitive tools. But the evidence whispers a different story. One of advanced knowledge, lost technologies, and a civilization that understood principles we're only rediscovering today. 12,000 years ago, something reset human civilization. A global catastrophe erased nearly everything, leaving only fragments of what came before. Yet those fragments reveal engineering capabilities that challenge everything we thought we knew about our ancestors. Tonight, we'll walk through the ruins of America's forgotten engineers, decode their hidden messages carved in stone and earth, and uncover what they desperately tried to preserve before the Great Reset swept their world away. Close your eyes and journey with us into the depths of humanity's lost knowledge. In the rolling hills of southern Ohio, something extraordinary lies hidden beneath centuries of grass and soil. When you first approach Serpent Mound from ground level, it appears to be nothing more than gentle ridges in the earth. But step back, way back, and suddenly a massive serpent emerges from the landscape itself, its sinuous form stretching nearly a quarter-mile across the countryside. This isn't just impressive earth-moving. It's precision engineering on a scale that defies everything we've been taught about ancient America. For generations, archaeologists dismissed these earthworks as ceremonial curiosities built by simple farming societies. The textbook narrative painted a picture of primitive peoples using wooden tools and human labor to pile dirt into rough shapes for religious purposes. But when modern surveying equipment began mapping these sites with GPS accuracy, a startling truth emerged. These aren't rough approximations of geometric forms. They're mathematically perfect construction that would challenge even today's civil engineers. The Great Circle at Newark, Ohio spans over 200 feet in diameter, so perfectly round that the margin of error is less than 2 feet. To achieve this level of precision across such a vast area requires not just sophisticated planning, but advanced knowledge of geometry, surveying techniques, and construction management. We're talking about coordinating hundreds, possibly thousands of workers with tools and methods that supposedly didn't exist in pre-Columbian America. But Newark's Great Circle is just the beginning. Travel south to the Hopewell ceremonial earthworks, and you'll find an entire complex of geometric forms, circles, squares, and octagons, laid out across 4 square miles with architectural precision that rivals any classical civilization. The octagon alone covers 50 acres, its 8 sides perfectly equal, and its angles mathematically exact. When archaeologists used laser transit equipment to measure these earthworks in the 1980s, they discovered something that sent shockwaves through the academic community. The builders had achieved tolerances within inches across distances of thousands of feet. This level of accuracy isn't accidental. It requires master planning, standardized units of measurement, and construction techniques that can maintain precision over vast distances and extended timeframes. The earthworks at Newark weren't built in a single season or even a single generation. Carbon dating reveals construction spanning several centuries, yet the geometric relationships between structures remain mathematically consistent throughout. Some organized group of engineers, was working from a master blueprint that transcended individual lifespans. Move west across the continent, and the evidence only becomes more compelling. In New Mexico's Chaco Canyon, ancient builders created a network of perfectly straight roads radiating outward from massive stone complexes. These roads don't follow natural contours or take the easiest path between destinations. Instead, they cut straight through cliffs and across mesas with the determination of modern highways, maintaining their bearing across dozens of miles of rugged terrain. The engineering challenges of Chaco's road system become staggering when you consider the logistics involved. Modern highway construction requires bulldozers, graders, and explosive charges to maintain straight lines through difficult terrain. Yet Chaco's builders achieved the same results using stone tools and human labor, creating roadways 30 feet wide that run laser straight for over 60 miles. The Anasazi Highway, as archaeologists call one major route, maintains its bearing so precisely that early Spanish explorers mistook it for a natural geological feature, a stone causeway created by some unknown force of nature. But perhaps the most mind-bending aspect of these ancient road networks is their apparent lack of practical purpose. Unlike Roman roads, which connected major population centers for military and commercial reasons, Chaco's roads often lead to remote locations with little evidence of significant habitation. Some terminate at the edges of mesas, others at isolated shrine sites, containing only small ceremonial structures. It's as if the roads themselves were the point. Massive construction projects undertaken not for transportation, but to demonstrate mastery over the landscape itself. This pattern of sophisticated engineering applied to seemingly impractical purposes appears throughout ancient America. The Poverty Point culture of Louisiana moved millions of cubic feet of earth to create geometric earthworks that dwarf many modern construction projects, yet left no evidence of permanent settlements large enough to justify such massive undertakings. These weren't just impressive achievements, they were deliberate demonstrations of technological capability that served purposes we're only beginning to understand. What makes these ancient American engineering achievements truly extraordinary isn't just their scale or precision, it's the level of mathematical sophistication they reveal. When researchers analyzed the geometric relationships between earthworks across Ohio, they discovered that the builders were using advanced principles of sacred geometry, incorporating precise ratios and proportional systems that wouldn't be formally recognized by European mathematics for centuries. The angles, distances, and alignments weren't arbitrary choices, but calculated elements of a comprehensive design philosophy that treated the entire landscape as a canvas for mathematical expression. Perhaps most intriguing is the growing evidence that these separate sites weren't isolated projects, but components of a vast, interconnected system. Astronomical alignments at Serpent Mound correspond to celestial events also marked by structures at Cahokia, hundreds of miles away. The unit of measurement used at Newark's earthworks appears to be the same standard employed at sites across the Midwest and Southeast. Even the orientation of Chaco's road seems to follow principles that guided construction projects throughout the ancient Southwest. This isn't the work of scattered tribes learning to pile dirt into religious symbols. This is evidence of a coordinated engineering tradition that spanned the continent. A sophisticated technical culture with standardized practices, advanced mathematical knowledge, and the organizational capability to execute massive construction projects across vast geographical areas. The question that emerges from this hidden blueprint isn't just how they built these monuments, but what else they might have been capable of creating. And that question leads us deeper into an even more unsettling mystery. If these ancient engineers possessed such advanced capabilities, what tools and techniques did they actually use to achieve such impossible precision? Deep in the granite quarries of New England, something doesn't add up. When colonial settlers first encountered the massive stone blocks scattered throughout the region, they assumed they were natural formations, until closer inspection revealed tool marks, precision cuts, and fitting tolerances that defied explanation. These weren't random chunks of stone, but carefully shaped megalithic blocks weighing up to 40 tons, cut with surfaces so smooth they reflect light like polished glass. Dr. Patricia Caldwell, a materials engineer from MIT who has spent decades studying these formations, puts it bluntly. The surface finish on these stones rivals what we achieve with modern diamond-tipped cutting tools. The precision is so exact that you can barely detect the tool marks even under magnification. What makes this observation particularly unsettling is that according to conventional archaeology, the people who shaped these stones had access only to copper tools, soft metal implements that should leave obvious gouges and irregularities in hard granite. Yet here we are, staring at stone surfaces that look machine-finished. The joints between blocks fit so perfectly that you can't slide a credit card between them. Corners meet at precise 90-degree angles. Curved surfaces flow with mathematical smoothness that would challenge a modern CNC machine. This isn't the rough handiwork of Bronze Age craftsmen struggling with primitive tools. This is precision manufacturing applied to some of the hardest stone on Earth. The mystery deepens when you examine the logistics involved. Consider the stone blocks found at sites like Mystery Hill in New Hampshire, some weighing over 90 tons, quarried from locations miles away and somehow transported across rugged terrain without any evidence of the massive infrastructure such moves would require. Modern heavy lifting operations use hydraulic cranes, specialized trailers, and reinforced roadways to move loads of this magnitude. Yet these ancient blocks were somehow positioned with millimeter precision on foundations that show no signs of the ground preparation such operations would demand. Industrial engineer Carlos Rodriguez, who specializes in heavy machinery operations, attempted to recreate one of these moves using period-appropriate methods. Even with a team of 50 men, wooden rollers, and optimal conditions, we couldn't budge a 20-ton replica more than a few feet before the logistics became impossible, he explains. The friction alone would require forces that would snap any rope or wooden lever available to ancient builders. Yet somehow they not only moved these blocks, they placed them with surgical precision. The positioning accuracy is perhaps even more baffling than the transportation. Blocks weighing tens of tons are set into place with gaps measured in fractions of inches. Foundation stones are leveled to tolerances that require laser transits to verify. Corner alignments are so exact that they create perfect geometric relationships across entire complexes. This level of precision isn't just difficult to achieve with primitive tools, it's virtually impossible without sophisticated measuring equipment and mechanical placement systems. But perhaps the most compelling evidence comes from the stone surfaces themselves. When archaeologist Dr. Amanda Foster examined megalithic sites across the Northeast using electron microscopy, she discovered something that challenges fundamental assumptions about ancient construction methods. The stone surfaces show evidence of thermal modification, controlled heating that would soften granite to a workable state, she reports. But achieving the temperatures required would demand furnace technology far beyond anything we associate with pre-Columbian America. The implications are staggering. If ancient builders possessed methods for heat-treating granite, they were operating with an understanding of material science that wouldn't be formally recognized until the industrial age. Some blocks show signs of having been shaped while in a semi-molten state, then rapidly cooled to achieve their final hardness. Others display crystalline structures that suggest controlled cooling processes designed to enhance specific material properties. Even more puzzling are the precision holes drilled through solid granite blocks, perfectly round openings that pass completely through stones weighing dozens of tons. Modern core drilling requires diamond-tipped bits and industrial-grade equipment to achieve similar results. Yet here we find evidence of drilling operations that created holes so precisely positioned and uniformly sized that they suggest the use of standardized tooling and systematic manufacturing processes. When material scientist Dr. Jeffrey Walsh attempted to replicate these drilling techniques using copper tools and abrasives available to ancient builders, the results were humbling. After 6 hours of continuous work, we managed to create a shallow depression less than an inch deep in granite, he admits. The ancient holes required precision that took our team weeks to achieve with modern equipment, yet they accomplished it repeatedly across multiple sites with identical specifications. This pattern of impossible precision extends beyond individual stones to entire architectural complexes. At sites throughout New England and the Great Lakes region, megalithic structures display construction tolerances that would impress modern engineers. Foundation blocks are leveled to within fractions of degrees across spans of hundreds of feet. Stone courses maintain uniform heights despite using irregularly shaped materials. Structural joints distribute loads with an understanding of engineering principles that wouldn't be formally codified until the development of modern structural analysis. The acoustic properties of these structures add another layer of mystery. Many megalithic chambers exhibit resonance characteristics that suggest deliberate acoustic engineering, spaces designed to amplify or modify sound in specific ways. When acoustic engineer Dr. Sarah Mitchell tested these chambers with modern sound equipment, She discovered that they were tuned to enhance particular frequency ranges, with a precision that implies sophisticated understanding of wave mechanics and architectural acoustics. What emerges from this technical analysis isn't just evidence of advanced construction capabilities, but proof of systematic engineering knowledge applied across multiple disciplines: materials science, structural engineering, precision manufacturing, and acoustic design. These weren't isolated achievements, but coordinated applications of a comprehensive technical understanding that challenges every assumption about technological development in ancient America. But if these builders possessed such sophisticated engineering knowledge, how did they organize the massive projects that put this technology to use? The answer leads us to evidence of coordination and planning on a scale that transforms our understanding of ancient American civilization. When astronomer Dr. Melissa Crawford first began mapping the celestial alignments of ancient American monuments, she expected to find the typical agricultural markers, simple orientations to track planting seasons and harvest times. What she discovered instead shattered every assumption about the sophistication of pre-Columbian astronomy. Using satellite positioning and computer modeling to analyze over 200 sites across North America, Crawford uncovered something extraordinary: a continent-spanning network of monuments aligned with astronomical precision that rivals modern observatories. The scope of this network is breathtaking. From the Serpent Mound in Ohio to the medicine wheels of the northern plains, from Chaco Canyon's great houses to the shell rings of the southeast, ancient builders created structures that track not just the obvious movements of the sun and moon, but subtle celestial cycles that require decades of careful observation to detect. The summer solstice sunrise at Serpent Mound aligns perfectly with lunar standstill positions tracked at sites over 1,000 miles away. The winter solstice window at Chaco's Casa Rinconada corresponds to stellar alignments marked by earthworks in the Mississippi Valley. This isn't coincidence. The mathematical precision required to coordinate these alignments across such vast distances demands a level of planning and communication that challenges everything we know about ancient American societies. Individual farming communities scattered across the continent shouldn't have possessed the organizational structure necessary to execute such a coordinated astronomical project. Yet the evidence clearly shows systematic planning on a continental scale. The precision becomes even more remarkable when you examine the technical challenges involved. Dr. Hudson Blackstone, an archaeoastronomer who has spent 15 years studying these alignments, explains the complexity. To achieve the accuracy we see at these sites, ancient observers would need to track celestial movements for generations, maintaining consistent measurement standards across centuries of construction. We're not talking about rough approximations. These are alignments accurate to fractions of degrees across astronomical sightlines spanning hundreds of miles. Consider the engineering implications. Creating a sightline from Cahokia's Monk's Mound to the summer solstice sunrise requires accounting for the Earth's curvature, atmospheric refraction, and the precession of the equinoxes, astronomical phenomena that supposedly weren't understood until the development of modern astrophysics. Yet somehow ancient American builders incorporated these corrections into their monument designs with mathematical precision that suggests they possessed sophisticated computational methods for predicting celestial movements. The Bighorn Medicine Wheel in Wyoming demonstrates this technical mastery on a smaller but equally impressive scale. This ancient stone circle marks not only the summer solstice sunrise and sunset, but also the heliacal rising of specific stars, astronomical events that occur only once per year and require careful observation to detect. The wheel's 28 spokes correspond to the lunar month cycle, while its internal alignments track the movements of Aldebaran, Rigel, and Sirius with accuracy that rivals professional astronomical instruments. What transforms this from impressive local achievement to continental mystery is the standardization of techniques and measurements across vast geographical distances. The unit of measurement used to construct Cahokia's Woodhenge, a precise increment that archaeologists call the Cahokian yard, appears at sites throughout the Midwest and Southeast. Stone circles in North Dakota employ the same angular relationships found in earthworks along the Gulf Coast. The astronomical calculations required to position Chaco's great houses match computational methods evident at sites scattered across a dozen modern states. This level of coordination implies something far more sophisticated than isolated tribal achievements. Dr. Rachel Montgomery, whose research focuses on ancient surveying techniques, argues that the evidence points to a unified system of knowledge and practice. When you find identical astronomical alignments, measurement standards, and construction techniques across sites separated by thousands of miles and hundreds of years, you're looking at evidence of systematic knowledge transfer. These weren't random discoveries, they represent a coordinated scientific tradition. The implications become even more staggering when you consider the logistics involved. Maintaining astronomical alignments across continental distances requires not just mathematical precision, but sophisticated communication networks capable of coordinating construction projects over generations. The builders needed standardized tools, consistent training methods, and quality control systems to ensure that earthworks built in Ohio would align with monuments constructed decades later in New Mexico. This suggests organizational capabilities that rival modern engineering corporations. Perhaps the most compelling evidence of centralized planning lies in the timing of these constructions. Carbon dating reveals that major astronomical monuments across North America were built during distinct phases of coordinated activity. The late Woodland period saw simultaneous construction projects from the Great Lakes to the Gulf of Mexico, all employing identical design principles and measurement standards. The Mississippian cultural expansion coincided with the establishment of astronomically aligned ceremonial centers across half the continent, each positioned to contribute to an overarching observational network. The builders weren't just tracking celestial movements for agricultural purposes. They were creating a continental-scale instrument for studying the cosmos itself. The network functioned as a distributed observatory, with individual sites contributing specialized observations to a comprehensive understanding of astronomical cycles. Some monuments tracked short-term solar and lunar patterns, others monitored the complex 18-year lunar cycle, and still others marked the slow precession of stellar positions across centuries of observation. This represents something unprecedented in human history. A scientific collaboration spanning thousands of miles and multiple generations, executed without written language or mechanical communication systems. The builders created a living map of the heavens written across the landscape itself, a testament to organizational capabilities and astronomical knowledge that challenges every assumption about technological development in ancient America. But if these ancient engineers possessed such sophisticated astronomical knowledge and organizational skills, what materials and resources did they command to support such massive projects? The answer leads us to evidence of industrial-scale operations that dwarf anything previously attributed to pre-Columbian societies. Hidden beneath the forests of Michigan's Upper Peninsula lies evidence of one of the most sophisticated industrial operations in ancient America: copper mining on a scale that rivals modern extraction industries. When metallurgist Dr. Garrett Wells first surveyed the ancient pit mines scattered across Isle Royale and the Quinault Peninsula, he expected to find simple surface excavations typical of primitive mining operations. Instead, he discovered an industrial complex that challenges every assumption about pre-Columbian technological capabilities. The scope of these operations is staggering. Over 5,000 individual mining pits dot the landscape, some reaching depths of 60 feet and extending horizontally for hundreds of yards through solid bedrock. The precision of the extraction work reveals an intimate understanding of geological principles that wouldn't be formally recognized until the development of modern mining engineering. Ancient miners followed copper veins through complex rock formations with surgical accuracy, removing millions of tons of stone to extract pure native copper with minimal waste. The efficiency of these operations is remarkable, explains Wells, whose analysis of the extraction sites has revealed sophisticated mining techniques. The ancient miners understood ore geology well enough to predict where copper veins would continue through rock formations. They developed specialized tools and methods for different types of deposits, adapting their approach based on geological conditions in ways that suggest generations of accumulated expertise. But the true magnitude of these operations only becomes apparent when you consider the numbers. Conservative estimates suggest that ancient miners extracted over 500,000 tons of pure copper from Great Lakes deposits, an industrial output that dwarfs most modern mining operations. To put this in perspective, that's enough raw material to supply the entire Bronze Age civilizations of Europe and the Mediterranean for centuries. Yet archaeological surveys have recovered only a tiny fraction of this copper in burial sites and artifact collections across North America. The obvious question becomes, where did it all go? The answer reveals a continental trade network of unprecedented sophistication. Copper artifacts bearing the distinctive isotopic signature of Great Lakes deposits have been found as far south as the Gulf of Mexico, as far west as the Rocky Mountains, and as far east as the Atlantic coast. Chemical analysis confirms that these weren't local imitations, but genuine Great Lakes copper transport across thousands of miles of challenging terrain using logistics systems that rival modern shipping networks. Dr. Patricia Hawthorne, whose research focuses on ancient trade routes, has mapped the distribution patterns of Great Lakes copper across North America. The evidence shows systematic distribution to predetermined destinations, she explains. This wasn't random trading. It was organized commerce with established routes, standardized packaging methods, and quality control systems. We're looking at evidence of industrial-scale resource management. The transportation challenges alone would have required engineering solutions far beyond what we associate with ancient societies. The organizational implications of this material science operation extend far beyond metallurgy. Coordinating copper extraction, processing, and distribution across continental distances required sophisticated management systems that could maintain quality standards, coordinate transportation schedules, and manage resource allocation across multiple production centers. The evidence suggests a level of industrial organization that wouldn't be seen again in North America until European colonization brought mechanized manufacturing techniques. Perhaps most significantly, the copper trade network appears to have operated for over 3,000 years, a span of continuity that dwarfs most modern industrial enterprises. Isotopic analysis shows consistent Great Lakes copper reaching distant destinations from approximately 5000 BC to 1200 AD, indicating institutional stability and technical knowledge preservation across dozens of generations. This represents one of the longest-running industrial operations in human history, maintained without written records or centralized political authority. The sudden cessation of large-scale copper mining around 1200 AD coincides with broader patterns of social and environmental change across ancient America, suggesting that the collapse of this industrial network was part of a larger systemic transformation that affected the entire continent. When European explorers arrived centuries later, they found only scattered evidence of the sophisticated metallurgical knowledge that had once supported continental-scale industrial operations. But copper wasn't the only resource these ancient engineers commanded with industrial efficiency. The evidence of their organizational capabilities extends to an even more fundamental challenge: controlling water itself across vast landscapes, creating hydraulic systems that would make modern civil engineers pause in admiration. In the heart of Arizona's Sonoran Desert, where summer temperatures routinely exceed 115 degrees and annual rainfall barely reaches 8 inches, the remnants of an impossible achievement stretch across hundreds of square miles. The Hohokam Canal system represents one of the most sophisticated hydraulic engineering projects in ancient America. A network of irrigation channels that transformed one of the continent's most hostile environments into a thriving agricultural paradise supporting tens of thousands of people for over a millennium. When civil engineer Dr. Caleb Morrison first began mapping the ancient canal routes, using ground-penetrating radar and aerial photography, he expected to find simple irrigation ditches, typical of early farming societies. Instead, he discovered a hydraulic network that rivals modern water management systems in its complexity and precision. The engineering principles evident in these canals wouldn't be formally understood until the development of modern fluid dynamics, Morrison explains. Yet somehow ancient builders created a system that managed water flow across hundreds of miles of desert terrain with mathematical precision. The scale of the Hohokam achievement becomes apparent when you consider the challenges involved. But moving water across the flat, sandy terrain of the Salt River Valley requires maintaining precise gradients, steep enough to prevent stagnation and silting, but gentle enough to avoid erosive erosion that would destroy crops and infrastructure. The ancient engineers achieved gradients accurate to within inches per mile across canal runs, extending over 20 miles. A level of precision that requires sophisticated surveying techniques and hydraulic calculations. But the true genius of the Hohokam system lies not just in its individual canals but in its integrated network design. The engineers created a hierarchical distribution system with primary canals fed directly from river diversions, secondary channels that distributed water to farming districts, and tertiary laterals that delivered precise allocations to individual agricultural plots. This wasn't random trial-and-error construction. It was systematic hydraulic planning that required understanding of flow dynamics, soil permeability, and agricultural water requirements. The construction techniques reveal equally sophisticated engineering knowledge. Archaeological excavations show that the builders used specialized tools to achieve consistent canal cross-sections, employed water-resistant clay linings to prevent seepage, and installed sophisticated gate systems to control flow rates and distribution patterns. Stone check dams were strategically placed to manage sediment loads and prevent erosion during seasonal floods, while bypass channels allowed maintenance work without shutting down entire sections of the network. Dr. Amanda Pierce, whose research focuses on ancient water management systems, has traced the influence of Hohokam hydraulic engineering across the Southwest. The technical principles developed by the Hohokam appear at sites throughout Arizona, New Mexico, and southern Colorado. She notes, "We're seeing evidence of knowledge transfer and adaptation that suggests a shared understanding of hydraulic engineering principles across multiple cultures and geographical regions." Modern Phoenix owes its existence to this ancient engineering legacy. When 19th-century settlers began planning irrigation systems for the Salt River Valley, they discovered that the most efficient routes had already been established over 1,000 years earlier. Modern aerial surveys reveal that Phoenix's current canal network follows the exact same paths laid out by ancient Hohokam engineers, a testament to the enduring logic of their hydraulic designs. The Army Corps of Engineers, tasked with designing Arizona's modern water infrastructure, found that deviating from the ancient routes consistently resulted in increased construction costs and reduced efficiency. The technical sophistication becomes even more impressive when you examine the flood control systems integrated into the canal network. The Hohokam engineers faced the challenge of managing both drought and deluge, maintaining water supplies during dry periods while protecting infrastructure from devastating flash floods that could destroy years of construction work in a matter of hours. Their solution involves sophisticated overflow channels, retention basins, and diversion structures that automatically activated during high water events. These flood control systems operated without mechanical components or human intervention, relying instead on hydraulic principles and carefully calculated flow dynamics to protect the network during extreme weather events. Archaeological evidence shows that the system successfully managed both decade-long droughts and catastrophic floods for over 8 centuries, demonstrating a level of resilience that modern infrastructure often fails to achieve despite advanced materials and monitoring technology. The urban planning implications of the Hohokam hydraulic system reveal organizational capabilities that challenge conventional understanding of ancient American societies. The canal network wasn't just an agricultural project. It was the foundation for sophisticated urban development that supported complex social hierarchies, specialized crafts production, and long-distance trade relationships. Archaeological surveys show that Hohokam settlements were strategically positioned to optimize water access while maintaining defensive advantages, with residential districts, ceremonial centers, and agricultural zones integrated into a comprehensive land use plan. The system's longevity, operating continuously for over 8 centuries, demonstrates institutional stability and technical knowledge preservation that rivals modern engineering organizations. Maintaining such complex infrastructure across multiple generations required standardized training programs, quality control procedures, and succession planning that could preserve specialized knowledge through periods of political and environmental change. Perhaps most remarkably, when the Hohokam system was finally abandoned around 1400 AD, it wasn't due to technical failure or gradual deterioration. Archaeological evidence suggests the abandonment was sudden and coordinated, as if the engineers deliberately shut down operations and walked away from centuries of accumulated infrastructure. The canals remained functional. They simply lacked operators who understood their sophisticated management requirements. This pattern of sudden abandonment echoes across ancient America, suggesting that these advanced engineering capabilities were vulnerable to disruptions that went far beyond simple technological challenges. The question that emerges isn't just how these ancient engineers created such sophisticated systems, but what kind of catastrophic events could cause entire civilizations to abandon technologies that had sustained them for centuries. Around 12,800 years ago, something catastrophic happened to planet Earth. The geological record preserves evidence of an event so dramatic that it fundamentally altered the trajectory of human civilization. A global catastrophe that climate scientist Dr. Jonathan Hayes describes as the most significant environmental disruption in human history. This event, known as the Younger Dryas impact, coincides precisely with the collapse of advanced cultures across North America and the sudden abandonment of sophisticated engineering projects that had flourished for millennia. The geological evidence is overwhelming. Ice core data from Greenland shows a temperature drop of up to 15 degrees Celsius, occurring within a single decade, a rate of climate change so rapid that ecosystems had no time to adapt. Sea levels rose by over 400 feet as massive ice sheets collapsed, drowning coastal civilizations and forcing mass population migrations inland. But perhaps most telling are the impact markers found in sediment layers dating to exactly 12,800 years ago. Microscopic diamonds, magnetic spherules, and chemical signatures that can only be created by extraterrestrial impacts or massive cosmic explosions. Dr. Patricia Whitfield, whose research focuses on Younger Dryas geological markers, has identified these impact signatures at sites across North America. The evidence shows multiple impact events occurring simultaneously across the continent, she explains. We're not talking about a single asteroid strike, but a fragmented comet or asteroid shower that devastated the entire northern hemisphere within a matter of days or weeks. The timing of this catastrophe aligns perfectly with the sudden collapse of sophisticated cultures across North America. The Clovis people, whose advanced projectile technology had dominated the continent for centuries, vanished from the archaeological record at exactly 12,800 years ago. Megalithic construction projects were abandoned mid-construction, their builders apparently fleeing or perishing before completing work that had been ongoing for generations. Advanced copper mining operations ceased abruptly, leaving sophisticated extraction sites to flood and collapse. But the most compelling evidence comes from an unexpected source: Native American oral traditions that have preserved detailed accounts of these catastrophic events across hundreds of generations. Dr. Calvin Thornton, an anthropologist who has spent decades documenting indigenous flood narratives, has discovered remarkable consistency in these accounts. Nearly every tribal tradition in North America contains stories of a great deluge preceded by fire from the sky, he reports. The descriptions are too detailed and too consistent to be dismissed as mere mythology. The Lakota speak of a time when the sky burned and waters covered the earth, forcing the ancestors to flee to high mountains. Cherokee traditions describe falling stars that brought flood and famine, killing the giants who had once shared the land. Hopi prophecies tell of the destruction of the Third World by water and ice, with only the faithful saved by traveling to new lands. These aren't vague creation myths. They're detailed historical accounts that correspond precisely with geological evidence of the Younger Dryas impact. The environmental devastation described in these oral traditions matches what geologists have discovered in the physical record. Massive wildfires swept across the continent as impact debris ignited forests from coast to coast. The Greenland ice sheet destabilized, releasing enormous volumes of fresh water into the North Atlantic and disrupting global ocean circulation patterns. Average temperatures plummeted as impact dust and smoke blocked solar radiation, creating what climatologist Dr. Miranda Stockton calls an impact winter that lasted for centuries. The archaeological evidence shows how quickly sophisticated civilizations collapsed under these conditions. Carbon dating reveals that major construction projects across North America were abandoned simultaneously around 12,800 years ago. often with tools and materials left in place as if workers had simply walked away. The Hopewell culture's elaborate earthworks show evidence of hasty modifications designed to serve as flood refuges rather than ceremonial centers. Copper mining sites in the Great Lakes region were suddenly flooded as glacial dams burst and lake levels rose by hundreds of feet. Perhaps most dramatically, the impact coincides with the extinction of North America's megafauna: mammoths, mastodons, giant ground sloths, and dozens of other large mammals that had coexisted with humans for thousands of years. These weren't gradual extinctions driven by climate change or hunting pressure, but simultaneous die-offs that occurred within decades of the impact event. The loss of these animals would have devastated human societies that depended on them for food, materials, and transportation. The survivors of this global catastrophe faced a transformed world. Sea levels had risen dramatically, drowning coastal settlements and forcing populations inland. The climate had shifted from relatively stable conditions to chaotic weather patterns that made traditional agriculture impossible. The sophisticated trade networks that had connected distant communities for millennia were severed as entire regions became uninhabitable. Most critically, the institutional knowledge that had supported advanced engineering projects was disrupted as master craftsmen perished and apprenticeship systems collapsed. Dr. Harold Pemberton, whose research focuses on post-catastrophe cultural adaptation, describes the aftermath. The archaeological record shows a dramatic simplification of material culture beginning around 12,800 years ago. Complex technologies disappear, settlement patterns shift toward smaller, more dispersed communities, and sophisticated artistic traditions are replaced by simpler forms. It's as if entire civilizations had to start over from scratch. Yet, remarkably, some knowledge survived. The astronomical alignments, hydraulic engineering principles, and metallurgical techniques we've examined represent fragments of pre-catastrophe wisdom that managed to persist through the chaos. Oral traditions preserved not just stories of the disaster, but practical knowledge about construction techniques, celestial observations, and resource management that would prove essential for rebuilding civilization. The question that emerges from this catastrophic timeline isn't just what was lost, but how the survivors managed to preserve any advanced knowledge at all. The answer reveals sophisticated strategies for protecting information through crisis, methods that may offer crucial insights for our own technological civilization as we face the possibility of similar disruptions. In the decades before the Younger Dryas catastrophe, something remarkable happened across ancient America. Archaeological evidence suggests that advanced civilizations began implementing deliberate strategies to preserve their most critical knowledge through the coming disaster. This wasn't random preparation. It was systematic preservation planning that reveals an understanding of cyclical catastrophes and the fragility of human achievement that modern civilization has largely forgotten. Dr. Clifford Barnes, whose research focuses on pre-catastrophe preservation strategies, has identified patterns of intentional burial and knowledge encoding at sites across North America. The evidence shows coordinated efforts to protect essential information through methods designed to survive floods, fires, and social collapse, he explains. These weren't hasty reactions to immediate threats, but long-term preservation projects that suggest the builders anticipated and prepared for cyclical, catastrophic events. The most dramatic example of this preservation strategy can be seen in the deliberate burial of sacred sites across the continent. Around 11,000 years ago, more than a millennium before the Younger Dryas impact, ancient builders began systematically covering their most important monuments with carefully placed soil and stone. These weren't natural accumulations of sediment, but intentional preservation efforts that required massive coordinated labor to execute. At sites throughout the Ohio Valley, sophisticated earthworks were buried under precisely engineered mounds that protected the underlying structures while encoding essential astronomical and mathematical information in their external geometry. Relationships, astronomical alignments, and geometric proportions that could be decoded by future civilizations even if written records were lost. Dr. Angela Westbrook, an expert in ancient information storage systems, has documented how these preservation strategies extended beyond physical protection to include redundant encoding methods. The same astronomical and mathematical principles appear at multiple sites across vast geographical distances, she notes. If one site was destroyed, the information could be recovered from dozens of others. This represents systematic knowledge backup on a continental scale. The most sophisticated preservation efforts involve creating what archaeologists now call time capsule complexes, underground facilities specifically designed to protect critical knowledge through catastrophic events. Recent discoveries in the Southwest have revealed subterranean chambers containing preserved organic materials, metal artifacts, and stone tablets with encoded information about engineering techniques, astronomical observations, and resource management practices. These underground complexes weren't simple storage areas, but sophisticated preservation environments with controlled temperature and humidity, drainage systems to prevent water damage, and structural reinforcement designed to survive earthquakes and surface impacts. The encoding methods used by these ancient preservation specialists demonstrate remarkable ingenuity in storing complex information without relying on written language. Mathematical ratios were embedded in architectural proportions, ensuring that essential formulas for construction, surveying, and metallurgy would survive even if oral traditions were disrupted. Astronomical data was encoded in stone circle alignments that could be decoded thousands of years later by observers who understood basic celestial mechanics. Perhaps most impressively, the builders created what information theorist Dr. Russell Hawkins calls nested redundancy systems, multiple layers of information storage that ensured critical knowledge could survive various types of catastrophic damage. The same engineering principles appear encoded in earthwork geometries, stone monument alignments, and artifact design patterns, Hawkins explains. Even if catastrophic flooding destroyed surface structures, future generations could recover the essential information from surviving elements. The timing of these preservation efforts reveals that ancient engineers understood catastrophic cycles and were actively preparing for predictable disasters. Tree ring data and ice core analysis show that the Younger Dryas impact was preceded by centuries of increasingly unstable climate patterns, warning signs that experienced observers would have recognized as precursors to major environmental disruption. Native American oral traditions confirm this understanding of cyclical catastrophes. Many tribes preserve detailed knowledge about recognizing the warning signs of approaching disasters and implementing community-wide preservation strategies to protect essential survival information through periods of chaos and social collapse. The effectiveness of these ancient preservation systems becomes clear when we examine what survived the Younger Dryas catastrophe. While most surface settlements were destroyed and populations scattered, the encoded knowledge persisted in buried monuments, underground chambers, and astronomical alignments that continued to function as intended. Post-catastrophe civilizations like the Mississippian culture demonstrate clear continuity with pre-disaster engineering principles, suggesting successful knowledge transfer through the preservation systems. Modern archaeological techniques are revealing the full scope of these preservation efforts. Ground-penetrating radar surveys have identified hundreds of buried structures across North America, many containing preserved artifacts and encoded information that hasn't been accessed since the original burial. LIDAR mapping reveals geometric relationships between surface monuments and subsurface features that suggest comprehensive preservation planning on a regional scale. The implications for modern civilization are sobering. These ancient engineers understood something we've largely forgotten: that technological advancement means nothing if knowledge can't survive catastrophic disruption. Their preservation strategies represent sophisticated information security protocols designed to protect essential knowledge through civilizational collapse, protocols that modern digital societies might need to consider as we face our own potential disruptions. But the most remarkable aspect of these preservation systems isn't just their technical sophistication. It's their success. The knowledge survived, the civilizations rebuilt, and the engineering traditions continued despite facing catastrophic disruption that destroyed most of their contemporary achievements. The question that emerges is how this preserved knowledge guided the recovery process and what lessons it offers for understanding humanity's resilience in the face of seemingly insurmountable disasters. In the aftermath of the Younger Dryas catastrophe, the survivors faced a world transformed beyond recognition. The sophisticated civilizations that had flourished for millennia lay in ruins, their cities flooded, their trade networks severed, their populations scattered to the winds. Yet within a few centuries, archaeological evidence shows the remarkable emergence of new cultures that displayed clear continuity with pre-catastrophe engineering knowledge. A recovery that suggests the preservation systems had worked exactly as intended. Dr. Amanda Riverside, whose research traces post-catastrophe cultural development, has documented this extraordinary recovery process across North America. The archaeological record shows a fascinating pattern, she explains. Initial post-disaster settlements are small and simple, focused purely on survival. But within 200–300 years, we begin seeing the reappearance of sophisticated construction techniques, astronomical alignments, and metallurgical knowledge that clearly derives from pre-catastrophe traditions. The recovery wasn't random rediscovery, it was systematic reconstruction guided by preserved knowledge. Carbon dating reveals that post-catastrophe cultures began their rebuilding efforts by locating and excavating the buried preservation sites created by their predecessors. Stone tools found at these excavation sites show evidence of careful, respectful removal of protective covering, suggesting that oral traditions had successfully transmitted not just the locations of buried knowledge, but detailed instructions for accessing it safely. The archaic period cultures that emerged around 8,000 years ago demonstrate this knowledge continuity most clearly. Their earthworks display the same geometric principles and astronomical alignments found in pre-catastrophe sites, but adapted to smaller scales and simpler construction methods. These weren't crude imitations, but intelligent adaptations that preserved essential knowledge while acknowledging reduced population and resource constraints. The builders understood the underlying principles well enough to scale them appropriately for their circumstances. The role of oral tradition in preserving technical knowledge becomes evident when examining the consistency of engineering practices across vast geographical distances. Post-catastrophe cultures from the Great Lakes to the Gulf Coast employed identical measurement systems, construction techniques, and astronomical calculation methods. Knowledge that could only have been transmitted through carefully maintained oral instruction systems that survived the civilizational collapse. Dr. Zachary Portland, an expert in traditional knowledge transmission, has studied how complex technical information survived through oral tradition systems. Native American cultures developed sophisticated mnemonic techniques for preserving detailed engineering and astronomical knowledge, he explains. Sacred stories, ceremonial songs, and ritual practices encoded precise mathematical relationships, construction procedures, and astronomical observations with accuracy that rivals written technical manuals. The recovery process wasn't uniform across the continent. Some regions showed rapid rebuilding using advanced techniques, while others remained at subsistence levels for centuries before demonstrating technological recovery. This uneven pattern suggests that access to preserved knowledge varied significantly, possibly due to geographical barriers, population displacement, or the loss of specialized keeper classes who maintained the oral traditions. The most remarkable aspect of the recovery process was the gradual restoration of continental scale coordination. Within a millennium of the catastrophe, archaeological evidence shows renewed long-distance trade networks, standardized technologies appearing at distant sites, and coordinated construction projects that required interregional communication and planning. The poverty point culture, emerging around 3,700 years ago, demonstrates this recovered coordination through its massive earthworks and extensive trade connections that spanned from the Great Lakes to the Gulf of Mexico. But the recovery wasn't simply a return to pre-catastrophe conditions. It represented evolutionary adaptation that incorporated lessons learned from the disaster. Post-catastrophe civilizations showed greater emphasis on distributed settlements rather than concentrated urban centers, suggesting deliberate strategies to reduce vulnerability to future catastrophic events. Construction techniques emphasize durability and repairability over monumentality, indicating cultural memory of infrastructure loss during the disaster period. The Mississippian culture, which peaked around 1,000 years ago, represents the culmination of this recovery process. Their achievements at sites like Cahokia demonstrate full restoration of pre-catastrophe engineering capabilities. Massive earthworks with precise astronomical alignments, sophisticated urban planning, and continental trade networks that rival anything, achieved before the Younger Dryas impact. Yet their construction methods showed clear adaptations designed to enhance survivability through environmental disruption. Archaeological analysis reveals that Mississippian engineers incorporated flood-resistant foundations, modular construction techniques that allowed rapid reconstruction, and distributed food storage systems that could support populations through extended periods of environmental instability. The success of this multi-millennial recovery process demonstrates something profound about human resilience and the power of preserved knowledge. Despite facing civilizational collapse on a scale that modern society has never experienced, the survivors not only rebuilt their technological capabilities, but actually improved upon them in crucial ways. The post-catastrophe cultures showed enhanced understanding of sustainable resource management, disaster-resistant construction, and distributed social organization that reflected hard-won wisdom about surviving in an unstable world. Perhaps most significantly, the recovery process reveals the critical importance of maintaining institutional memory across generations. The cultures that achieved the most successful recovery were those that had preserved not just technical knowledge, but also cultural understanding of how to organize large-scale projects, coordinate inter-regional cooperation, and maintain knowledge transmission systems through periods of social stress. The final phase of recovery, represented by the sophisticated achievements of late Mississippian culture, demonstrates complete restoration of pre-catastrophe engineering capabilities combined with enhanced resilience against future disruptions. These civilizations had successfully learned from catastrophe, incorporating disaster preparedness into their fundamental cultural and technological frameworks. But this remarkable recovery story raises an uncomfortable question for modern civilization. If such advanced ancient cultures could be so completely disrupted by natural catastrophe, what vulnerabilities might our own technological society face? The patterns revealed by this ancient reset cycle offer both warnings and guidance that may prove essential as we confront our own potential civilizational challenges in an era of rapid environmental and technological change. As we examine the evidence of ancient civilizational collapse and recovery, an unsettling pattern emerges when we compare those ancient vulnerabilities to our own modern situation. The sophisticated cultures that built the megalithic monuments, continental trade, networks, and advanced engineering systems we've explored weren't primitive societies. They were technologically advanced civilizations with complex infrastructure, specialized knowledge systems, and interconnected economies that in many ways mirror our own global society. Dr. Mitchell Crawford, a systems analyst who studies civilizational resilience, draws disturbing parallels between ancient collapse patterns and modern vulnerabilities. The ancient civilizations that collapsed during the Younger Dryas possessed many of the same characteristics that define our current global society, he explains. Highly specialized knowledge concentrated in expert classes, just-in-time resource distribution systems, and critical infrastructure that required constant maintenance by skilled technicians. When those systems were disrupted, recovery took centuries. The ancient catastrophe wasn't just an environmental disaster. It was a cascade failure that began with climate disruption, but amplified through social, economic, and technological vulnerabilities. Sound familiar? Modern climate scientists warn that our current trajectory toward rapid global warming could trigger similar cascade effects: infrastructure failure, supply chain disruption, mass population displacement, and the potential loss of technological capabilities that depend on stable social institutions to maintain. But perhaps the most sobering parallel lies in our knowledge storage systems. Ancient civilizations encoded their most critical knowledge in durable physical monuments, stone circles, earthworks, and metal artifacts that could survive for millennia. Our modern civilization, in contrast, stores virtually all of its essential knowledge in digital formats that are extraordinarily vulnerable to disruption. A single electromagnetic pulse event, whether from solar activity or technological conflict, could instantly erase decades of accumulated scientific and technical knowledge stored on magnetic media and computer systems. Information security expert Dr. Sarah Daniels has studied the fragility of modern knowledge storage systems. We're living through the most vulnerable period in human history when it comes to knowledge preservation, she warns. Ancient civilizations lost their knowledge gradually through institutional collapse and population displacement. We could lose centuries of accumulated knowledge instantaneously through digital system failure. And unlike those ancient cultures, we've largely abandoned the physical backup systems that allowed knowledge recovery. The parallels extend beyond knowledge storage to infrastructure dependencies. Ancient civilizations relied on robust, distributed systems, multiple copper mining sites, redundant trade routes, and decentralized communities that could function independently during crisis periods. Modern civilization depends on increasingly centralized and interdependent systems. Global supply chains, centralized power grids, and specialized manufacturing facilities that create single points of failure across entire technological sectors. Consider what happened during the COVID-19 pandemic, a relatively minor disruption compared to the Younger Dryas catastrophe. Global supply chains collapsed, critical manufacturing ground to a halt, and even developed nations struggled to maintain basic medical supplies. That disruption lasted months, not decades, yet revealed how quickly our interconnected systems can fail when faced with unexpected stress. Now imagine a Younger Dryas scale event. Simultaneous climate disruption, infrastructure failure, and social collapse lasting not months, but centuries. The ancient preservation strategies we've examined offer crucial lessons for modern disaster preparedness. Those civilizations understood something we've forgotten: that technological advancement means nothing if the knowledge can't survive disruption. They created redundant storage systems, distributed their critical knowledge across multiple locations, and encoded essential information in formats designed to outlast the societies that created them. Emergency management specialist Dr. Austin Blackwell argues that modern society needs to adopt similar preservation strategies. We should be creating physical backup systems for our most critical knowledge, libraries of technical manuals, seed banks, tool collections, and manufacturing guides stored in formats that don't require electricity or computer systems to access, he suggests. The ancient civilizations that successfully recovered from catastrophe were those that had invested in durable knowledge storage systems. But the most important lesson from ancient recovery patterns may be organizational rather than technological. The cultures that achieved the fastest post-catastrophe recovery were those that maintained strong local communities, diverse skill sets, and institutional knowledge about cooperation and resource management. Modern America's increasing urbanization and technological specialization has created a population largely disconnected from basic survival skills that were commonplace just generations ago. Few Americans today could produce food, manufacture tools, or maintain infrastructure without access to global supply chains and industrial systems. This represents a dramatic departure from the resilient, self-sufficient communities that characterized successful post-catastrophe recovery in ancient times. The ancient civilizations understood that true security comes not from technological sophistication alone, but from combining advanced knowledge with robust, distributed capabilities that can function independently during crisis periods. Their recovery success depended on maintaining communities where essential skills were widely distributed, where multiple people understood critical processes, and where local resources could support basic needs without external dependencies. Perhaps most critically, the ancient preservation systems succeeded because they were designed and implemented before catastrophe struck, not as reactive measures during crisis periods. The civilizations that survived and recovered were those that had invested in long-term resilience planning during periods of stability and prosperity, exactly the situation modern America finds itself in today. The question facing our own civilization is whether we have the wisdom to learn from these ancient examples before we face our own potential reset event. The engineering marvels and preservation strategies of our predecessors offer a roadmap for building genuine resilience, but only if we're willing to acknowledge our vulnerabilities and take action while we still have the resources and stability to do so. The choice of what we preserve and how we preserve it may determine whether our descendants face centuries of rebuilding or can maintain the technological capabilities that define modern civilization. As we reach the end of this journey through America's lost civilizations, we're left with a profound realization. The Great Reset isn't ancient history. It's a recurring pattern that has shaped human development for millennia. The advanced engineers who built the astronomical monuments, continental trade networks, and sophisticated preservation systems we've explored weren't unique anomalies in human history. They were our predecessors, facing the same fundamental challenges of building resilient civilizations in an unstable world that we face today. Their legacy offers us something invaluable: a roadmap for survival. Dr. Catherine Standridge, who has spent her career studying ancient resilience strategies, puts it simply: these civilizations succeeded not because they avoided catastrophe, but because they prepared for it. They understood that advancement without resilience is just a more spectacular way to fail. The ancient engineers built their monuments to last not decades or centuries, but millennia. They encoded their knowledge in multiple formats, distributed their critical capabilities across vast networks, and created backup systems designed to function when primary infrastructure failed. Modern America has achieved technological capabilities that would astound these ancient builders, yet we've abandoned most of their resilience principles. We've concentrated our knowledge in vulnerable digital systems, centralized our manufacturing in distant locations, and created a population largely dependent on complex supply chains for basic survival needs. We've prioritized efficiency over resilience, specialization over redundancy, and short-term optimization over long-term sustainability. The ancient preservation strategies offer concrete lessons for modern implementation. Just as those civilizations created redundant knowledge storage systems, we need to establish physical backup libraries containing essential technical information that doesn't require electricity or computer systems to access. Manufacturing guides, agricultural techniques, medical procedures, and engineering principles should be preserved in durable formats that could survive electromagnetic pulses, natural disasters, or social collapse. Local communities need to redevelop the distributed capabilities that characterize successful ancient societies. This means fostering neighborhood-level skills in food production, basic manufacturing, infrastructure maintenance, and resource management. The ancient copper trade network succeeded because they connected self-sufficient communities, not dependent populations relying on distant specialists for survival needs. Infrastructure planning should incorporate the redundancy principles that guided ancient engineering projects. Instead of single points of failure, we need distributed systems with multiple backup pathways. Power grids, communication networks, and transportation systems should be designed to continue functioning even when major components are compromised. The ancient astronomical alignment network succeeded because they could lose individual sites without compromising the overall system. Perhaps most importantly, we need to revive the long-term thinking that characterized ancient preservation planning. Those civilizations invested enormous resources in systems designed to benefit generations they would never meet. Understanding that true security comes from preparing for cyclical challenges rather than simply optimizing for current conditions. Education systems need fundamental restructuring to include practical resilience skills alongside technological specialization. Ancient cultures successfully transmitted complex knowledge through apprenticeship programs that combined theoretical understanding with hands-on application. Modern Americans should learn not just how to use technology, but how to repair, maintain, and even recreate essential systems when sophisticated tools aren't available. The ancient astronomical network succeeded because they created communities of skilled observers who understood both the big picture and practical details. We need similar approaches that develop both specialized expertise and general competence, ensuring that critical knowledge exists in multiple forms and locations rather than concentrated in vulnerable institutions. Financial and economic systems should incorporate the diversification principles that guided ancient trade networks. Instead of just-in-time delivery and single-source dependencies, we need strategic reserves, local production capabilities, and economic structures that can function during supply chain disruptions. The ancient copper trade survived for millennia because it connected distributed production sites through flexible exchange networks rather than rigid centralized systems. Most crucially, we need to develop institutional memory about cyclical risks and long-term planning. Ancient civilizations understood that catastrophic events follow predictable patterns and invested accordingly in preparation and recovery capabilities. Modern society tends to treat disasters as anomalies rather than inevitable recurring challenges, leading to reactive rather than proactive resilience planning. The ancient engineers left us more than monuments. They left us a methodology for civilizational survival. Their approach combined advanced technical capabilities with robust backup systems, distributed knowledge networks with local self-sufficiency, and short-term optimization with long-term resilience planning. These principles aren't antiquated concepts from a simpler time. They're sophisticated strategies developed by civilizations that successfully navigated multiple catastrophic cycles. The Great Reset pattern they experienced isn't just historical curiosity. It's a preview of challenges our own civilization may face as climate change, technological disruption, and social instability create conditions similar to those that triggered ancient collapses. The difference is that we have their example to learn from, if we choose to pay attention. Dr. Andrew Kellerman, whose research focuses on civilizational continuity, offers this final perspective. The ancient engineers succeeded because they built for the world as it is, not as they wished it to be. They understood that catastrophe is normal, stability is temporary, and true progress comes from creating systems that can survive and adapt through changing conditions. And that wisdom is their greatest gift to us. The monuments they built still stand as proof that human ingenuity can create things that outlast the civilizations that built them. The knowledge they preserve still guides us toward resilient solutions for modern challenges. The patterns they revealed still offer hope that even after catastrophic disruption, human civilization can rebuild, recover, and continue advancing. The question facing us now is simple. Will we learn from their example while we still have the time and resources to act? The choice, like the responsibility, is ours. Good night, and remember, some knowledge is too important to lose.